Okay, good morning, folks. The time is now 11:30. I don't think anyone's actually in here yet, but we're going to be keeping an eye on it as people come in. Oh, hi, Chris. How you doing? Just going to give about 5 minutes, maybe, roughly, for people to start joining in. Just out of curiosity, can you guys hear me okay? Perfect. Okay. We're just going to start probably in about 2 to 3 minutes, roughly, just to get everyone in here. And as you can see in the chat, I have somebody who is kind of fielding the chat room for me right now. And what we'd like for you guys to do is if you could just state your name and the school you're at in the chat room. This just sort of helps us to see, out of who we sent out the attendance because unlike Key to Learn, we don't really have a track record of who's here, so we kind of have to go by what we see on the name. Perfect. Good morning. I I guess I got to go by your the username I see. Bridgie Bailey from Pineway Public School and Tim Dew, welcome. Oh, sorry, and Miss Valonge. Valonge? Valonge. Yeah, Valonge. All right, well, I know you guys are probably very busy, so we're just going to jump right in, and hopefully we can get this whole thing taken care of in about an hour. So, welcome everyone. Good morning welcome to the AirWatch webinar. My name is Brandon, and I've been with the client service desk for about 2 years now. We have been proceeding with this AirWatch project as we're rolling it out to all the schools, and this is one of the components of the AirWatch project is just to provide training for all the staff members out there who will be using AirWatch, especially at the school level. Um, just a few things before we begin. I do have the webinar is being recorded, and it will be available at the end of the webinar using the same YouTube link that you guys are using right now for this live stream. So as soon as this is over, it basically becomes available as a rewatchable video if you guys want to ever go back and just kind of check up on something that you may have missed or wasn't quite clear. Also, there is a 10-second delay between the time that you guys hear my voice and from the moment that I've said it. So just keep that in mind. If you guys say something in the chat room and I don't quite acknowledge it, um, it's probably due to that 10-second delay. And of course, feel free to ask questions in the chat room. I do have my colleague here, Israt, who is actually going to be actively watching the chat, and she'll try to answer usually the simpler questions in the chat just to provide you guys with a quick answer. And if it's something that requires a little bit more time, what we're going to do is we're going to take away that question till the end of the webinar, and then we will answer it in more detail at the end. Or if it's something quick and I happen to just so catch my eye on it, I'll try to address it right away. And also, because we're using YouTube as a platform, I just want to go over some things you can do to adjust the quality. If you're not familiar with YouTube, if you kind of hover your mouse over the video, you will see in the bottom right-hand corner there is a little gear icon. If you click that gear icon and go over to quality, you will see some options there. Particularly, we recommend 720p and 1080p. Those are the HD quality. So if you're watching the webinar and you're seeing that the text isn't quite legible or you can't quite read it very well, you might want to adjust the quality to something higher so it's a little bit more clear. Also, because this is live, with YouTube Live, there is a little button next to the volume that says live. You want to make sure that that live button has a red dot next to it. If it's gray, it means that there's a little bit of a delay. It's not quite as late as possible or as live as possible, you could say. So what you can do is you can actually just click the text where it says live. You'll see a red dot appear, and then you will be on the quote-unquote livest possible. So let's jump right in. The objectives for this webinar are to familiarize schools with AirWatch and managing iPads. We intend to highlight the key benefits of AirWatch and what it means for you, as well as demonstrating real-world scenarios of how you'll be using AirWatch in your school. So let's go right into it. AirWatch, what is it? Well, AirWatch is a mobile device management system / enterprise mobility management system. The two terms are interchangeable. They both basically refer to the same thing. The premise behind AirWatch is that it's a centralized portal for configuring and managing mobile devices. So we have sort of like a one-stop shop. In this case, it'll be the AirWatch web console, where we can manage all of our iPads from within the browser. The benefits include automatic TDSB wireless network access to WLAN TDSB 01. So what we noticed prior to this is that we were having a lot of difficulties with teachers and staff members not knowing what wireless network to join with their iPads, and then when they found out it had to be TDSB staff or TDSB Wi-Fi, it would require that they would type in their employee number and password, which isn't quite ideal because that would sort of make the iPad, everything that you do on the network kind of falls under your username and password, which, if you give it off to a student, you don't want that to be associated with your credentials. So with AirWatch, they will all be on WLAN TDSB 01. That is our corporate Wi-Fi, and it does not require authentication. So you won't have to worry about what username or password do I type in. Once they're in AirWatch, they'll join WLAN TDSB, and you can stick with that. There's also easy app installation for multiple iPads, so no longer will you have to pick up each individual iPad, click on the App Store, type in the app that you want, click the download, sign in with your TDSB mobile. It was a nightmare. So we've gotten rid of that with the AirWatch. Essentially, we can push apps from AirWatch to all your iPads or multiple iPads at a given time. There's a consistent experience between iPads. So all the iPads will have the same blue background, and when you lock them, they'll have the TDSB logo on the lock screen. So the look and feel is going to be consistent amongst the iPads, and it's pretty evident just by looking at one that it is a TDSB iPad. There's also built-in security policies, which should prevent students from adding or removing apps without your approval or knowledge, as well as applying passcodes to the device, which is one of the major calls that we get at the client service desk prior to AirWatch, is that a student would grab it, go to settings, add a passcode, and wouldn't tell the teachers, and then you would try to guess and try to figure out what the passcode is, effectively locking the device out. Once an iPad is locked out, it does have to be wiped. So with AirWatch, there will be no ability for students to apply passcodes, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail in a few moments as to how that works. Also, remote wireless configuration updates. So as I said, as opposed to going up to each iPad and signing into the App Store, everything's done over Wi-Fi. So you don't have to plug it into a computer with iTunes, or if you've ever had the privilege of using Apple Configurator, you know how cumbersome that can be. With AirWatch, it's all done over Wi-Fi. So you would just select the apps that you want for your iPads. You can apply them to a whole group, and it's all pushed over the Wi-Fi. And with that also comes the removal of the requirement for the Apple ID. So we don't need to sign in to each iPad with the Apple ID in order to download these apps. It's all done through AirWatch. So by default, who can log in? As of this point, if you've gotten the invitation for the webinar, more than likely it is because you have already gotten started in AirWatch, and you probably have already been granted access to AirWatch. But by default, your principals have access to AirWatch, and also AirWatch administrators. Now, AirWatch administrators are granted access through LAS, which is that local administration system shortcut that you see in your school folder on the desktop. So in LAS, you can pick a user, add them into the what's known as the EMM group, or the Enterprise Mobility Management Group. And once you do that, it'll take about 12 to 24 hours for that person that you've selected to finally have access to the console. So this demo is going to cover, first and foremost, the iPad new look and feel. I'm going to show you what the iPad looks like in a few moments. We're going to then go over to the AirWatch console and just get familiar with navigating the AirWatch console, you know, where everything is and how it's all kind of laid out. And then we're going to go into organizing your iPads into smart groups, so grouping them into certain subsections of your iPad. So you could say, like, these are my iPads on this card, or this is my iPads for, you know, grade 1s or 2s. So they group them into smart groups, and then we'll organize them that way. And then from there, once they're grouped, we will then add and remove apps to those smart groups, and add and remove web clips to those smart groups, so that they'll be deployed to all your iPads. And if you don't know what a web clip is, I'll get into that later. So first and foremost, how is it that I know that my iPad is on AirWatch? The most obvious is the blue background, as well as the TDSB logo on the lock screen, and the presence of these two apps, the Agent and the Catalog. The Agent app is the app, or the brain of AirWatch, that sort of tells the iPad to report in to the AirWatch web console. So I'm just going to switch over to the iPad so you can quickly see what I'm referring to. I have one here connected to my machine, and this is sort of, it's actually right here on my desk, and I can actually, this is a live stream of the iPad essentially. But as you can see, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lock it real quick so you can see what the lock screen looks like. So this is what it looks like. It's got the TDSB background logo there, and then when I unlock the iPad, it's just got this blue background, and again, the presence of these two apps, the Agent and the Catalog, right here, tell you that this thing is enrolled into AirWatch. Now, I just want to go over how the iPad works with AirWatch. So as of right now, I mentioned there are some built-in security policies with AirWatch that will prevent students from adding and removing apps, as well as setting a passcode. So as you can see, just by looking at these first two pages of the iPad, there is no app store, and that is by design. So because we're pushing apps out through AirWatch, we don't want, or don't need to rather, go into the app store and download apps that way. So the app store is there, or sorry, not there, and we can actually unlock the app store, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm just going to go into settings here, and we can see that on the left-hand side, what used to be here is a little section called passcode, as well as you can see iCloud is grayed out, and that is to prevent students from signing in with an iCloud account, which could then, they could turn on this feature called Find My iPad, which basically locks it to their account, which we don't want. So what this is right now we are in what I would like to call student mode. So this iPad right now is almost locked out of anything that would cause it any sort of harm, or requiring to be wiped, or being able to enter in any Apple IDs, or any App Store installations. However, any TDSB staff member, so it can be anyone, and as long as you have an employee number and password, we can log into the Agent app over here. We can log into the Agent app, and what it'll do is it'll put it back to the iPads that you're probably more familiar with, where, you know, you can put the passcode on and the App Store will be there. And I'm going to demonstrate that for you now. So if I launch the Agent app, which is this blue shield here, what we'll see is a login screen. Assuming it loads, bear with me here. This kind of stuff always happens during the webinars. The Wi-Fi just slows to a crawl. It can take a little bit for the Agent app to load. Turn on location. No, we'll just get cancel. So as you can see, it's being prompted for the username and password. So for the username, I would enter in my employee number. Same thing applies to you. A student number and password will not work here. Now, the password is your current network password, so the same one you use for your email. I'm not going to type it in with you guys all looking, because then you will all know my password, so bear with me as I swap away, and I'm going to type in my password. See, I've actually done that before on a previous webinar, And I didn't realize it until I went back and looked at the webinar and saw, I was like, oh, every key press that I'm typing in there for my password is clearly visible to everybody watching and now on the public internet. So I had to reset my password very promptly. And I've learned not to do that because never under any circumstances divulge your password to anyone. So I'm just going to switch back to the iPad. I've typed in my password. I'm getting this prompt about the location setting. I'm just going to cancel out of that. Don't worry about that. But after logging in with my username and password, sure, we'll allow notifications. I just enrolled this device, so that's why there's a lot of prompts that are coming up. More often than not, you can just neglect them. So now that I've logged in to this iPad, I can see here that there's a logout button, and I'll get back to the logout button because that's important when I log out. That will then put it back into quote-unquote student mode. But because I've logged into the AirWatch agent, now what happens when I press the home screen is I can see that the App Store is available right here. So now, because I've logged in with my employee number and password, it knows that I'm a staff member and probably very trustworthy, and I can install apps manually. So this would be doing it like the old-fashioned way. Now, keep in mind, if I'm going to install an app this way, I would require my Apple ID, and it kind of, takes away the whole premise of AirWatch, which is, to be able to push things over AirWatch. But if you wanted a one-time go to install an app just for one particular iPad, this is something that you could do. As well as if I go into settings, I can see now that the passcode option is available. If you guys decide that you do want to put passcodes on your iPads for whatever reason, you could sign into the agent and then set a passcode on your device. Also, the iCloud is back and the iTunes and App Store. I can now sign in there. So this is basically, because I signed in, it's in quote-unquote, oops, no, go away, Siri. It's in teacher mode, right? Now, let's say I'm ready to give this back to a student. I obviously don't want them to have the ability to go to the App Store or go put in a passcode. So all I need to do is actually just go back into the agent and click the logout button here. It'll ask me if I want to log out. I hit yes, and it'll take me back to the login screen. And what should happen is once that's all done loading, everything that just opened up, like the App Store and settings, will go back to being locked down and having disappeared. So now if I go back, I should see that the App Store, it could take a few seconds. So you just want to make sure that you have logged out and that everything has sort of disappeared prior to handing it back. Of course, on the webinar, everything takes a while. So I'll just give that a few seconds. I'm going to go back to the presentation. I don't want to waste your time while we wait for the AirWatch to take effect here. But essentially what's going to happen is that App Store and all the settings that we just showed you are going to eventually disappear and lock down. It's all kind of related to the wireless network connectivity for that stuff to take effect. So getting back to the presentation, so that was the agent in the catalog. That'll tell you that the device is on AirWatch. Now we're going to move over to the actual web console, and this is where we will manage our iPads, so where we will group them and push apps out to them. So we can log into the AirWatch console from anywhere on the web, not just within the TDSB. There is no browser limitation. It doesn't matter if you're using Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Safari, a Mac, whatever. It should work on all browsers as far as we've tested. An important thing to note when we do go to login is that the username format should be TDSB /1 and then your employee number. I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because that's within the picture. Bridgie Bailey, I'm just looking at what you're saying in the chat here, and you're saying you're getting an error message. That is because did you download the app from the App Store, or sorry, the agent app from the App Store, or did you wipe your device and then do the enrollment that way? Because if you're downloading it from the App Store, the agent, that's basically in the form of a manual enrollment, which I can get to at the end of the webinar. I feel like I need to take that away because it's a little bit requires a little bit more explanation. So if you have another iPad that you can follow along with, that would probably be ideal because it sounds like the one that you have is not quite enrolled properly. So we can help you with that afterwards. But going back to the AirWatch console, again, the username format is TDSB / and then your employee number followed by your current network password. The 4-digit PIN is required to be created on first login, and that 4-digit PIN essentially is used for additional administrative tasks to prevent you from accidentally doing something. So for example, if I wanted to wipe a device, it will ask me to type in a 4-digit PIN that I've created when I first log in. The link for AirWatch is right there, https://cn239.awmdm.com. I know that's a mouthful, but if you actually look in the video description below, there is a link there if you would like to click and follow along. Now, when you first log in, you will get a accept terms of agreement. You can just click accept, and you can read it on your leisure if you want something to lullaby you to sleep. And then you will be prompted to create the 4-digit PIN. And this PIN code, if at any moment you forget it, you can always reset it to something else. It's just used for the doing an extra administrative task, which I'll show you later on in the demonstration where this PIN will come into play. With that, I'm going to switch over to the AirWatch console so you can see all this and what I'm talking about. I just need to leave my slide here. And I have a tab open here. So this is what the AirWatch console login screen looks like. And as I showed on the previous slide, when we go to log in, we always type in TDSB / and then our employee number. In my case, sorry, I should mention that the TDSB is not case sensitive. You can do TDSB lowercase and then your employee number, or you can do, different case. It doesn't matter as long as you type in TDSB / that tells AirWatch that you're logging in as a TDSB user. So TDSB / employee number and then your current network password. And we click login. And for me, right away, I go right at the dashboard. Now, if this is the first time that you're logging in, as I showed you on the previous slides, you will probably get prompted to accept the terms of agreement as well as create that 4-digit PIN code. So just click accept. Set a PIN code that means something to you. Obviously, don't use your bank card. Just something that you might, not have much difficulty trying to remember. But of course, if you ever do forget it, you can always reset it, and we'd be happy to show you that. But jumping right into AirWatch, the first screen you see when you log in is the dashboard. I don't want to spend too much time here, just because it's briefly what it is basically a bunch of charts that kind of break down your environment. So all the charts here are interactive. And for example, if I'm looking here, it shows total deployment 8. That basically just tells me that I have 8 iPads that are currently enrolled in my AirWatch environment. And then out of those 8 iPads, it kind of breaks them down into other statistics that you may find useful. Like, for example, no passcode. It shows here I have 6 iPads that have no passcode, so 75% of them have no passcode, which is fine. One of the more useful ones that you might want to look at is the last seen breakdown. This will tell you when it is that a device last checked into AirWatch. So the last time it was online, talked to it over Wi-Fi and communicated with AirWatch and said, hi, I'm alive and here I am. So you might want to look here, and if you see a device, for example, if I look at the days column here, it shows that I have one device that hasn't communicated with AirWatch in 16 or 30 days. That may suggest that my device is missing or stored away in a drawer somewhere or maybe even stolen. But you could then, what you can do with these charts is actually you can delve in and figure out what are those iPads it's referring to, because all these charts are interactive. So if I hover my mouse over, you'll see they kind of change a color. And if I click it, so for example, that 16 to 30 days one, I could click that little orange bar, and it'll take me over to the list view of my devices, and it'll show me exactly which device it is that it's referring to. So there now I have a better idea of the device that is missing, and now I could then go on with my investigation to figure out what's going on. So I'm just going to flip back to the dashboard, and that's just the general idea of the dashboard. It just kind of breaks down into nice, lovely little charts here of your AirWatch environment, all the different things, and you can kind of click through them and see what the statistics are referring to. But I do actually want to go over to list view. So just below dashboard over here, we see the list view. Sorry, let me just clear that filter out. So the reason this filter is here, I just want to briefly mention, is because we were on the dashboard and clicked that chart, it applied a filter for us automatically. There are some filters that you could apply here, but we won't go into that. It's kind of a little bit advanced, but the idea is that when I click that dashboard, it'll apply this filter. But if I click this X button, it'll clear the filter, and what it'll show me is a list view of all my devices that are currently in my AirWatch environment. So if you're in AirWatch, what you'll see is a list of all the iPads that you currently have in your AirWatch environment. It'll show you the name of the device. Mind you, we can rename the devices to something more meaningful. It'll show you the version number of the device. So for example, what version of iOS is it running? This one's on 10.21. This one's on 932. And on this column here for last seen, we'll show you what the time it last reported in AirWatch. So in the case of the iPad next to me, it's this one right here, this EHD's iPad. It last communicated with AirWatch 5 minutes ago. Basically, if I were to open up a browser, it tries to check in AirWatch as much as possible and just tell it that it's alive when it's connected and turned on. So you should see a relatively recent value there, as opposed to some that are turned off for quite some time. We'll see, they go red and show, 23 hours, 1 day, 5 days, 30 days. But the idea is that you're going to see in this list view over here a list of all your iPads. And we can actually then delve into each individual iPad, so we can narrow our focus down onto one particular iPad if we want to by clicking the iPad name. So for example, this EHD's iPad, this is the one that I actually have over here. This is my EHD iPad. I can actually go in and narrow down my focus to this individual iPad if I wanted to see some more details regarding that device. When I first click that iPad, it'll take me to a summary tab, just some quick information about the device. Not much to spend too much time here, just kind of gives you a general sense of the device. The serial number, that might be important if you want to try to keep track of your iPads. As well as storage capacity, how much space is available on that iPad, and whether there's any available operating system updates, so any updates to iOS for your iPad. But a useful tab here is apps. So as I'll show you later on in this demonstration, we're going to be applying apps to our iPads, and what we'll see in the apps tab is a breakdown of the apps that we have chosen to be assigned to the iPad. And in the apps tab, we can actually come in here and see which apps it is that we assign to be pushed to this iPad, and it'll show you whether it's installed based on this green check mark over here. Sometimes that check mark will be red, sometimes it'll be gray, and that'll basically tell you whether or not it is installed fine. If it's green, it means it installed fine. If it's any other status, you may want to contact us to see what's going on. Or another thing that you can do is there's also a little button here to install. So what that'll do is it'll try to force install that app. So for example, if I chose an app to be installed to this iPad and it was showing gray and it was taking its sweet time and I'm like, what's going on here? I could press the install button and AirWatch will try to force that install right away. But generally speaking, when you apply apps to your iPads, they don't take very long. I mean, it really depends on your network speed or what, is it bogged down, or are there a lot of people using your Wi-Fi right now? So sometimes, you can choose an app to be installed and it doesn't appear right away. And then you come to the apps tab and you see there's a gray check mark. Sometimes it's just a matter of waiting. Sometimes you can press the install button and it'll forcefully push it. But more often than not, if you just let it take its time, it will eventually make its way down to the iPad. So just summary and apps are really the two ones you want to be concerned about here. I wouldn't go into all these other tabs here. If you want, you can look through it through your leisure, but they're not really as useful in as far as the scope of this presentation goes. But what I do want to show you is at the top right-hand corner here, there are some things that we can do to the iPad. So if we want to work with an individual iPad, there's some actions that we can perform. So I'm going to expand this More Actions tab here, and it'll give us a sense of the certain things we can do to this iPad. So without even touching the iPad physically, I can send commands and send actions to the device that can be done through the web console, and then it'll do it over Wi-Fi. And just really quick, for example, there is an iOS update. So for example, if I had seen on that summary tab down below that I had an iOS update, I could choose to force push that update right now if I wanted to. There is device wipe. Device wipe would be if I wanted to start fresh, if I want to wipe this iPad completely clean and just go right back to the beginning, vanilla settings, and then do it all over again, I could do it from the device wipe. I'm just going to click device wipe. I'm not going to wipe my device just because I do need it for the presentation, but I just want to show you where that passcode that I was referring to came in at the beginning. Sorry, not the passcode, the PIN number, that 4-digit PIN. If I click device wipe, it's actually going to ask me to type in my 4-digit PIN down here. So I'm not going to type it in correctly, but I would type in my PIN number, and it would then wipe the device. So the idea of that 4-digit PIN is just so that if I wanted to do something like wipe the device, I obviously wouldn't want to click something like that accidentally. So that PIN number prevents me from doing a device wipe accidentally, basically. So it's like a one last step sort of confirmation before I actually go through with the device wipe. I'm going to cancel out of that, but if I did do that, it basically would trigger the device wipe right away. There is clear passcode. I did not put a passcode on this device, but as I showed you earlier, if I had went into the agent and logged in and then put a passcode on the device, I could clear that passcode. If, say, for example, I don't remember what it is. So under clear passcode and then device, if I were to click that, it would remove the device passcode. The important one here that I really want to spend some time on is edit device. Now, edit device is essentially renaming your device. It is very important to rename your iPads so that they are meaningful to you. So most schools, what we found, actually have their iPads labeled. So they'll have like a sticker on the back, and it'll be iPad 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way up to however many iPads you have. You may want to come in here and rename your iPads so that it works with your own school's naming convention of your iPads and how you guys logically group them. So just as a real world example, I'm going to click Edit Device. And let's say this iPad that I have with me here belongs to the library. So I would call it library. Maybe it's in a cart. I'll call it library cart. And hypothetically, let's say this iPad was labeled iPad number 3. So I would want to give it something meaningful like this. So library cart number 3. So that when I do come into AirWatch, instead of seeing a list of iPads, all just saying iPad, 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 I don't know which one's which. I would want to rename it so that it's meaningful to me when I'm looking at that list. So I know that library cart number 3, oh, I know exactly which iPad that is. That's the one on the library cart, and it's labeled number 3. So by doing this, it'll change the name as it appears in AirWatch. But we can actually also change it so that the name appears on the device. So there is a little checkbox over here that says set friendly name as device name. If I check that off, what that'll do is it'll take the name that I've set here and push it over to the iPad. So I'm just going to, as a real world example, I will do that right now. So I got library cart number 3. I've chosen to set the friendly name as the device name. And if I click save, what that's going to do is it's going to push that name over to my iPad. And again, like most things in AirWatch, everything is sort of dependent on the network and the availability and the speed of your network. So hopefully when I go over to my device, that will have made it over already. So here's my iPad. If I go into settings and under general and then about, I can see the name. Yeah, it's still showing EHD's iPad. That should change as soon as... you know how webinars work, right? They nothing happens right away. Hopefully, it's been good before in the past. It's still showing EHD's iPad. I'll give that a second to cook, and what we'll do is we'll check back on that later. But what should happen is that device name should be renamed on the device side of things. Can you label from the actual device? No, so you can't do it the other way around. So I can't on the device change the name and push it to AirWatch. It goes from AirWatch to the device. I hope that makes sense. But now I see that in AirWatch, the name has changed here, right here at the top, library cart number 3. So now if I go back to my list view and I'm looking at my iPads, I'll be able to quickly identify that particular iPad because it's called library cart number 3, as opposed to something like iPad, iPad, iPad. And that's very importantly also going to come up later when we go to actually group our devices, which I'm actually going to jump over to in a few moments. I just want to show you one more thing with the library, with the More Actions tab there. There is a feature called Loss Mode. If for whatever reason you ever, just to go back, I might be clicking too fast, but More Actions over here in the top right-hand corner. There's a feature here called Loss Mode. Loss Mode essentially will put the device into loss mode, which basically locks it down and prevents it from being used until it's returned. So for example, if I am having a hard time finding a device, or maybe I'm under the sneaking suspicion that a student may have taken it home with them, what I can do is I can enable loss mode, and that will put the iPad almost into an unusable state with a customized message on the screen. I'm not going to demonstrate it just because it does take a little bit of time, and it's not very it's very seldomly used, but I think it is important to note that I could do it. Essentially what would happen is I could choose a message to be shown on the iPad that says this iPad is missing, please return it, and you can't open it up, you can't unlock it, you can't interact with the iPad at all until it is returned, and then I could disable lost mode. So after enabling lost mode, that would change to disable lost mode. So with that, we've renamed the device. Now we probably want to, oh, actually, I just looked over at my iPad, and under settings, general and name, we can see that the iPad is now named what I set it to in AirWatch, library cart number 3. So eventually, as I said earlier, things will eventually propagate down to the device. It just depends on, network speed or all that good stuff. So we've renamed our iPad. It's now got a nice name that we can quickly identify. So now we're going to apply some apps to it. But before we apply an app to the iPad, sorry, just looking at the chat here. Perhaps you've already mentioned this, but how do I tell which of my 20 iPads it is that I'm renaming? If, for example, I'm getting my iPads in, so let's say I'm enrolling them and I'm looking here on my list and I want to figure out, what iPad is what and how to rename it, you're going to have to look at the serial number. So it's a little bit cumbersome when you're doing the initial enrollment. So say, for example, this iPad here that I had, library cart number 3, before it was named iPad, just regular iPad. In fact, let me just rename it back so I can show you a real world example here. So I'll call it iPad again. And now I'm in here, and I'll wait for that to refresh. So say I'm enrolling my devices. I got all my iPads coming in here, and as they're coming in, they're just coming in as the name iPad, and I have no idea which one is which. The unfortunate, one way you could do it, and what I recommend is, as you're enrolling them, so I would enroll them one by one. So enroll a device, know which device it is that you just enrolled based on your own labeling, and then rename it as it comes in. That's one way of doing it. Or you can actually go to the device, go into settings, then go into general, then go into about, and then you look at the serial number value over here, right there. If I take that serial number, so I may want to pull it aside here because just to copy and paste it. I could then take that serial number, DMQK5G8 4F183. I can take that serial number and I can actually filter that down. Sorry, I'm just going to close out of there. I just wanted to copy it. So I could take that serial number and I can go over to my list here. And in the top right hand corner, there's this little text box here that says search list. And if I paste that serial number into search list, it'll filter down amongst my iPads that particular serial number. So now I know the serial number of the iPad I have in my hand is that iPad that I see here in AirWatch. And then you would want to come in here. Actually, sorry, I didn't show this earlier, but you can actually rename it just by clicking the pencil icon over here. So rather than going into the iPad, clicking more actions, and then rename device or edit device rather, I can just click that pencil right away here, and then it'll quickly bring up this window here so I can rename it right away. So I'll call it library cart number 3 as I had before. Set the device name, set the friendly name as the device name, so that's going to push the name over to the device. And yeah, that's how I recommend you would do it, is that you would sort of have the iPads with you, search for the serial number, rename it accordingly, and then hopefully that's like the first and last time you will have to do that, unless you wipe the device. But that initial enrollment process is a little bit cumbersome in that you do have to rename your devices so that they're kind of meaningful in a way, and you may have to filter down on the serial number just to get them named appropriately. But now that I do have that named, I'm now going to go over to groups and settings, because we now want to push an app to this iPad, but we actually don't push apps to individual iPads. We push them to groups. So before we do anything, we have to group our iPads. So I'm going to go over to groups and settings here. I'm going to click groups. And I'm not going to go to organization groups. I'm going to click assignment groups. There's a lot of things in AirWatch that the option is there, and it's not quite clear what it is that it does. That's why it's kind of important to really follow the documentation, because we tried to slim it down as much as possible, but so it looks easier and more presentable for how we use it. But obviously, there's some things that we can't tuck away and hide, like the organization groups. So don't worry too much about it. But what you want to do is groups and settings over here, and then assignment groups. And then the button right here says Add Smart Group. This is what we're gonna do. We're gonna click Add Smart Group, and that's gonna come up with this prompt here to create a new smart group. So we're gonna be grouping our iPads. Now by default, this screen will take you to it'll say choose type and then select criteria just up here at the top. Uh, I wouldn't recommend using select criteria. In fact, I would just ignore it altogether. The criteria is basically like a dynamic list, so I group my iPads based on conditions. So for example, I could group my iPads on every iPad that is Apple iOS version 10 or, 10.2. So if you had a need to do something like that, then you could use the select criteria up here, but it's a little bit cumbersome. And what we notice with schools, what they do is they just want to manually group it, right? If I have my library cart, for example, I just want to plug in my library cart into a library cart group. So what we do is we switch over here to select devices or users. So not select criteria, select devices or users. I made some selections, so it's just warning me that I'm going to lose it, and that's totally fine because I don't want to keep it. So I've switched over from select criteria to select devices or users, and now what we're going to do is we're going to manually choose our devices and put them over to the smart group. So what'll happen if I put my cursor into this devices text field here, a little drop-down menu is going to appear, and it's going to show up a list of all the iPads that I have in my environment. And again, this is why it's super important to rename your devices, because when I get to this stage where I'm ready to group them, I want to be able to tell which ones I'm putting in this group. So I know that I have my iPad here labeled as iPad library cart number 3. So that right away I know I can add my iPad into this group because I'm going to create a library cart group. So I would select that from the list, then I would click the add button, and it moves it over to the devices in the smart group section. It just shows me the list of ones I'm putting in there. And then before I save it, I have to give it a name up here. So in the top right hand corner it says name. So obviously I'm going to call this one library cart, as it contains my library cart number 2. You can add multiple iPads into this group. So if I click back into this checkbox, it brings me the list up again. I can click library cart number 2 and move that one over as well. So now you would basically do that 100 times or however many iPads you have that you want to put into the group. And they basically move over. So now I can see that I have these 2 iPads in here. So I'm going to click Save. Now I have both my iPads into a group called Library Cart, and I can see that group is reflected here under Assignment Groups. It shows the name Library Cart. It is indeed a smart group, and there are currently no assignments. An assignment would basically be an app. We're going to get to that very shortly. And the devices, it shows me really quickly that there are indeed 2 devices in this smart group. And if I'm looking at the screen and I'm like, what devices are in that smart group? I can actually just click that 2, and it'll bring me up a little informational panel showing me those 2 devices that belong to that smart group. It takes me back into list view. So that's groups and settings. So sorry, again, groups and settings, assignment groups up here, and then I'm looking at all my smart groups. We created the library cart group. It does contain my 2 iPads in that group. And now we're going to push an app to the smart group, which as a result will push it to both iPads. So if I go over to Apps and Books, it'll take me to a screen here with 2 tabs, Purchased and Web. Now there's already a bunch of apps that we see here, and it's kind of unknown. That's very cryptic. It's not very helpful. But when we're going to apply apps to smart groups in AirWatch, we need to filter based on our school. So our school, I'm hoping that you guys are aware, but in order for an app to appear into our AirWatch environment, the app request form needs to be submitted. So that includes free apps, that includes paid apps. You submit the app request form. You will be notified when that is loaded into the AirWatch environment, and at that time it'll become available. And then what will happen is when I'm on here under Apps and Books, under the Purchase tab, I'm going to put my cursor into the search list field, and now I want to filter down on the apps that apply to me. So I would either type in my school name into the search list text field here, or my school's 4-digit site code, or trillium number, if you will. In the case of my test school, it is 9991, or I could even just type in the name of the school, test school. And then I hit enter, and what it's going to do is it's going to take this whole board-wide list of apps and filter it down to the ones that are available for me to use. So if I scroll down, these apps are all here. These are the ones that I can use with AirWatch. I can now push these apps to devices through AirWatch. And again, these all got here because I had submitted the app request form. The app request form is available in the video description, I believe, actually. It actually might be out of date now that I'm thinking about it, because more recently we've changed the app request form. Prior to the app request form change, it only allowed you to do 3 at a time, and you can only do either free or paid, and so you'd have to submit it multiple times. It wasn't very user friendly. Just gonna quickly jot over here to the app request form. There is this link for the app request form. It is available on the ServiceIT MDM page, but this is what I would fill out. And this includes both free and paid apps. So I would fill in my name, my role, my email. I would choose, my school site, if it's a school site or is it a central site. Choose my school name from a list. I could then select the app type. I can do free. Again, free apps do need to be submitted through here. I can do paid, or I can do both. Now, if I do choose the paid option, it will require my principal's approval, as well as the cost center and the general ledger. But if I'm not using paid apps and I switch to free, for example, those fields are no longer required. I would choose AirWatch here because that's how we're going to be managing our iPads. And of course, over here is where we have the app name and the VPP app URL. I'm not going to go into it here just because it is all kind of laid out on the MDM website. Just really quick, I'm just switching over to serviceit.tdsp.1.ca/MDM. And this is sort of like our everything AirWatch website. And the AirWatch request form is all laid out here. It says click here for the app request form. And it kind of details the process of how to submit the request form, as well as the link is right here to this form that I have open here. Sorry, let me switch over here. So all the information here is explaining how the whole process works. And then there's also a blurb at the top of the app request form that kind of makes that clear. The app request form now, though, as I mentioned, we did change it recently. So now you can submit an infinitesimal amount of apps. So for example, every time I click this button, it gives me the option to add more and more and more apps. So the idea is you want to include as many apps as possible when you're submitting the app request form, so that when you're finally more comfortable with AirWatch, or you're ready to go with AirWatch, you're excited, you have a lot of apps available for you to use. They've recently also made it so that, because we were aware that a lot of schools weren't very happy with the turnaround time, it can take up to 10 days to get these apps loaded into AirWatch, due to some strange requirements by the purchasing term and teaching and learning, I think. Sorry, but they're kind of working to improve the process, so hopefully that 10 days thing doesn't stay like that for long. We had it down to 72 hours before, and now suddenly it's 10 days. We're hoping to streamline this a little bit better so that it's not that long. But for now, that's why we recommend you try to get as many apps as possible on this app request form when you submit it, so that way when you're ready to go with AirWatch, you have as many as possible loaded in there. And we were aware that because of the turnaround time that the app request form does take a little bit. What they've done is they've put some commonly used apps into the catalog. So I'm just switching over to my iPad here really quick just to show you. So say, for example, I went into AirWatch and I was looking for an app and I didn't see any apps loaded there. Well, now I know, great, I have to submit the form and I got to wait, 10 days to get an app? What they've done is they put some of the more commonly used apps in the catalog. I'm not sure if they enabled it for my particular group. I might not see anything here. Yeah, I don't see anything here. But for the schools, what will happen is when you go into the catalog app, there are some common apps that are already loaded there. And you can actually just, on every app, click the install button. Now, on here, obviously, it already shows installed because it's the AirWatch agent. But what you would see is, Google Drive, Dash and Dot, I think, some of the more common ones that will be available for the catalog, and you can click the install button, and then that way you can do it that way on the iPad until we get your apps in. So that's a quick little workaround while you're waiting for your apps to come in. And of course, as at the beginning of this presentation, I showed you, you can always sign into the agent, which will unlock the App Store. And then if you do it that way, you can also, manually install apps the quote-unquote old-fashioned way, if you're finding that the wait is a little bit too much for you. But again, submit the app request form, include as many apps as possible. It could take up to 10 days, and what will happen is you'll be notified via email when they're ready. And then what will happen is, now going back to AirWatch, you should see them loaded in here like so. So if you're an AirWatch and you've gone to the purchase tab and you've typed in your school name and all you see is the AirWatch agent, or even let's say nothing at all listed here, that basically means your app request form has not been processed yet, or maybe you hadn't submitted it yet at all. So just be mindful of that. It's very important. But if I have got that email confirmation, I now know that, okay, my app should be available in AirWatch. I should see the list of my apps that I submitted from that form available here to be used. Now, we're going to take the app that we want, or we can actually do this to multiple apps, and we're going to push them over to the smart groups. So, just as an example, I'm going to push I'm going to show you Google Sheets. I'm not actually going to push Google Sheets, but I want to show you something about every app that you're going to come in here and see. So when you come in here and you're looking at the apps and you've decided which app you want to push to that group, there's a little button over here. It kind of looks like a pencil on top of a clipboard. And if you hover your mouse over it, it'll say Edit Assignment. We'll want to click that. It will bring up a window. And I just want to show you something really quick here. We use this as an example for every webinar. Right smack dab in the middle of the screen, it says application eligible for blah, 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 blah. But then there's a blue button that says Enable Device Assignment. When you first come into your Apps tab and you go through your apps, you will see this blue button that says Enable Device Assignment. We need to click that button, and then it will prompt me if I would like to enable device assignment. And if I click OK, that blue button will be gone, and then I'll never see it again. We need to do that for every single app. I'm not going to go into the weird details as to why that has to happen. Essentially what it is when you push that button is you're saying you don't need an Apple ID to install this app. That's sort of that, it gives AirWatch the ability to install this app without the Apple ID. So I just want to show you that as an example, that you will see this blue button when you first go into an app, and you always click the Enable Device Assignment before you do anything. But I'm gonna go back to another app here. So I'm gonna do CP24. Again, I click Edit Assignment. So after clicking that blue button, the reason I didn't click it is because I want to use that as an example for future presentations, because once I click it once, it's gone forever. But what will happen is, this is what you'll see after you press the blue button. This tells me that the application is enabled for device-based assignment. So now I can push this app out to my smart groups. And how we push out this app to the smart groups is down here in the middle of the screen, there is Add Assignment By, and if we hover our mouse over, we'll see a little link here for license code by smart groups. If I click that, a little text box field will appear here, and it says Select Smart Group. So because we created that smart group earlier, now we're going to choose that smart group from this list here. So if I click my cursor, and then I go down to Library Cart, that's the one that we created. Effectively what I'm doing is I'm going to take this app and push it to that entire Library Cart group. And just really quickly over here, it shows that there are 2 devices in this group, and I need to now allocate at least 2 licenses to this group. Because there are 2 devices in this smart group, I need to choose this allocation field to reflect 2 or higher, so the minimum of 2. And basically, even though the app is free, and you're wondering why am I allocating licenses if the app is free, just with the way that AirWatch works, we do, even with free apps, we have a license count. So if I look over here on the left-hand side, it shows total licenses 100. So for free apps, you're going to come in here, you're going to see the total licenses is going to be a very high number. It'll either say 100 or 500, something like that. We basically just shot for the moon when it came to the free licenses. And what it is you need to allocate a license even regardless of it being free. So what I see here is it shows total license 100. I have 2 devices in this smart group. So now I know I at least need to allocate 2 licenses of CP24 to this smart group. Now I can even go above and beyond. I don't necessarily need to do 2. If I do 10, I can do 10 here, as long as I don't exceed my total licenses over here, which is 100. And we set it really high to like 500. This was one niche example where it's only 100. But when you go in there and you have a free app, you'll see 500 licenses available for free apps. And that is so that you can actually over allocate. So in the event, for example, I have this library cart smart group. Even though there's 2 devices in here now, what can happen is later, let's say later on down the road, I get 5 more iPads and I'm adding them to my library cart. I don't want to come back in here and change that allocation to accommodate those 5 new iPads. If I add a really big number, I'll even do 50. I'm gonna do 50. So if I for some reason down the road get 48 new iPads, I won't have to come back in here and change this allocated value here, because I will have already overcompensated for it. So all I would do if I got those new 48 iPads is add them to the library cart smart group. And once they're part of the library cart smart group, they will get this app. So that is how the license count works, the device allocation as well as license allocation works. You can add multiple smart groups. So for example, let's say I had another smart group. Let's say, let's see. There are some smart groups that you'll see by default, like iPads all, and we left those in there for you by default. So say, for example, you know for a fact you want all your iPads to have a certain app, and you don't want to go through the troublesome of having to create a group and add them all in. You can just select the all group, and effectively what this will do is it'll basically push the app to all your iPads. I'm just going to X out of that. But you could, for example, the idea I wanted to show you here is that I could add multiple smart groups here. The list just keeps growing and growing and growing. But for now, I'm just going to leave that one app here, the one group, which is the library cart. Now, if I scroll down, a very important thing to note about how we're going to push out this app is over here under assignment type. It shows auto. Now the assignment type, there's 2 options. There's auto and on-demand. Auto will automatically push out the app to the device. So if I leave it as auto, what will happen is the second I hit save here, that app should fire off to my devices right away. The other option is on-demand. Now I showed you earlier in the catalog the on-demand. I showed you earlier the catalog that was on the iPad. When I choose on-demand, what it does is it loads it into the catalog. And then it gives me the option of installing this app. It's not going to push it out right away. It's not forcing the app. It's just giving the user who is using the iPad the option to install it. So I'm gonna do one here for now as auto. So what I'm gonna do is when I hit save, what I should see is that the CP24 app should appear over on my iPad. Again, network permitting, as all things are with AirWatch. And all the other values here, don't worry about them. Leave them as the default. It's totally fine. The only things you're concerned about is auto and on-demand. I'm going to leave it as auto. We've assigned it to our library cart. We've given it a whack ton of allocated license here, so we never have to come back in here and change that again. And when I click save, the idea is that that app is now going to push over to my iPad. And again, it all takes time based on the network. So I'm not going to show you the iPad right now because I'm looking at it and I don't see it yet. But this will give me the opportunity to quickly show you that on-demand feature. So I'm going to pick another app. Let's see. Wonder for Dash and Dot. Sure. If I click the Edit Assignment button again, I have the ability to go in and add the smart groups again. So I'm going to go here, add assignment by, license code by smart group. I'm going to choose my library cart as well. So this would be an example of like putting multiple apps onto the same group of iPads. I need to choose the allocation value. Again, shooting for the moon. I can see here I got 500 licenses. Why not? Let's do 100 licenses. And I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to go to from auto to on demand. And I'm going to click save. So I've basically deployed this with two different methods. One is auto and one is on demand. And with on demand, what will happen is it should appear in the catalog, and then with auto, it should appear in the catalog. Again, I don't. Oh, Perfect timing. Look at that. Just when I came over to the iPad, you can see CP24 started downloading right away. And now if I go to the catalog, what I should see is that Dash and Dot app that I added in here. And there we go. So I see Wonder for Dash and Dot. It's not installed. It's not installing. It's not processing. It's just giving me the option to install it. So if I wanted to make an app optional, like I'm not forcing it to the iPad, I can put it in the catalog by choosing that on-demand option there. So then if I wanted to, I could just, press the install button here. And it'll ask me if I want to install it. But CP24 made it right away, which is good. So that is adding an app. There is also the option to add a web clip. So if we're looking at the top here next to purchase, there is web. If we click web, this will give us the option to add it's almost like an internet shortcut. So if I click the web tab, I'm just going to kind of breeze through this. Click add application. It's going to choose me to select a platform. We're only working with Apple iOS devices. Going to click continue. It's going to ask me the name. So what this is going to do is basically going to put a shortcut on the iPad. It's going to be basically you click it, it opens up Safari and takes you right to the web page that you want. This may be helpful if you want, like for example, I'll just show you in this example. Let's say I wanted to, on my iPad a link to the virtual library. I'll type in the name there. I would give it a URL. This would be the address of the website. Last time I didn't remember, so I had a tab up here. Right? Yeah, there we go. So this is the virtual library. So say I want to show this page on all my iPads. I can copy this URL here at the top. Go back over to here, and I can paste the URL into here. And I'm not going to give it a description. But what I'm going to do is switch over to the Images tab. And I want to give it a fancy icon. I wanted to give it something so that it looks meaningful when I'm looking at it on my iPad. Now I do have a little shortcut on my desktop for, here we go, virtual library. So that'll be the icon. And then once again, like both, same thing with apps, we're going to go to assignment. And I'm going to assign it to a smart group. Same thing, library cart, virtual library. It makes sense. And I'm going to leave exclusions as is. And push mode. Just like before, we have the two options of on-demand and auto. Sorry, guys, for not verbally addressing what's going on in the chat. I do see a lot of chatter going on, and I'm hoping Israt is handling this. You got that? Okay. Anything that is a little bit more cumbersome, I'm going to take it away to the end of it. So that way, because some people probably need to go back to class. So if you do want to stick around and figure out more detailed answers to it, there's a Q&A period at the end. But just really quickly going back to the web clip, again, I've chose the assigned group as library cart. And the exclusion is no. The push mode, I'm going to choose auto because I want to force it to my iPads. And I'm going to click save and publish. And what that'll do is it'll bring me one little confirmation screen here. I'm going to click publish. And what will happen is much like an app, it should appear on my iPad. Again, network permitting. The CP24 app was so quick. Ah, look at that, right away, boom. If I come over here, next to CP24, you see the virtual library. That's not an app, that is a web clip. And the web clip is basically just a shortcut. So now if I click that, it'll take me over to the virtual library. We're almost done here, don't worry. We've basically covered just about everything. We've added an app, we've created smart groups, we added apps to the smart groups, we've created a web clip and added the web clip to the smart group. The last thing I just want to show you is the removal of an app. So now that I've applied an app, let's say I want to change my mind and go back and remove an app, I just go back to my purchase tab, as I saw here, and like I did before, I'm going to filter on my apps. I can type in my school site code or my school name, and then I'm going to find the app that I want removed. So if I'm looking at my iPad and I say, I don't need CP24 anymore, same way that I added an app, I'm going to actually go back in and work backwards and to remove an app. So I'm looking at my CP24 app. I go over to edit assignment over here. It will bring up the window, and I see it's still got my library cart group loaded in here. To remove the app, simply all I need to do is click this little blue X button next to the smart group. It'll say delete the assignment will uninstall the application from all devices belonging to the assigned group. Do I want to continue? Obviously I do. I click OK. So now what I've done is by removing the smart group association from the app, it's going to remove the app from the devices. So if I click save, what I should see is on my iPad, that CP24 app should disappear. Let me just switch over here. And it's gone. So I think that's everything. So with that, we did go over how to, rename our devices, how to see all our devices, how to take our devices, put them into smart groups, how to then assign apps to those smart groups, and then how to remove those apps from I guess I should say remove the assignment from that smart group, which will effectively remove it from the iPads. That is it for the presentation. There is a Q&A period. I did see a lot of chatter, so I'm going to take a few moments to go through and see if anyone wants to stick around and hear their answers answered in more detail. Right here, serviceit.tdsp.on.ca/mdm is our Everything AirWatch page. Everything that you heard here in the webinar is available there and more. There's also the link to our YouTube channel, so you can go back, and if you want to watch this video again and you lost the link, you can always go to the ServiceIT MDM page and go through our YouTube channel link, and then you can come back and watch this again if you would like. And of course, if at any time you have something very strange going on, you can always give us a call at the help desk or client service desk at 416-395-4357. We are option 5. Anything and everything AirWatch, please feel free to give us a call or open up a web chat. We'd be more than happy to help you out with that. And with that, we're going to go over to the questions. And Israt, did we have any questions that you would like me to address in the chat?
So Alumni channel, they were actually asking for the system settings. So there's an accessible option.
System settings.
Yeah, I've never played with that feature, but so it's saying triple tapping the home button prompts for a password to unlock guided access. So I'm assuming it's something in agent.
Triple tapping the home button, 1, 2, 3. That was a double tap. So I'm not sure if you're still there, but you said triple tapping the home button does what?
So if you triple tap it, it will bring up an access guided access.
Guided access.
It's not doing for us.
1, 2, 3. Yeah. Oh, you know what? I think on one of the new iOS updates, I'm not sure if you're still there, but were you signed into the agent when you did that? Prompts to a password to unlock guided access. I think that might be an accessibility feature that they added in. You guys are very welcome. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much for attending the webinar. Again, feel free to come back and watch this later if you want to see the Q&A period or just get a refresher. It's always available on our channel, and you can always go back and watch all our previous videos as well.
I think they might have left, but I actually logged a ticket, so I will
Okay.
follow up with them anyways.
All right, so we do have a ticket log for that particular issue. I'm unable to reproduce it on my iPad. Every time I tap the home button, it does the cascading windows, which is used to close them.
Check if under settings the guided access is there.
Yeah, settings and guided access. See, my theory was that you had to unlock the iPad. Guided access, switch controls. Is it an accessibility setting?
Yeah. So the question is actually saying.
Oh, here we go. Guided access off. Oh, so if I toggle that on, let's see. Now if I do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2.
So initially the question was.
That might be the answer to the question regarding that.
Does this management prohibit guided access? So he actually.
No, it didn't. So for example,
The triple tap option.
yeah, I didn't unlock the agent app or anything, so it's still in this quote unquote student mode. So it's still pretty much very much locked down. I can't set a passcode, but I can actually still go into the accessibility settings here, and I can turn on that the guided access. It is turned on, but I think the accessibility shortcut for guided access, it says triple click the home button for. Oh, look at that! It's grayed out.
Yeah, and also another question
Yeah.
for this was
Oh
that in
wow.
system setting there's a section for accessibility option. I could set an iPad to be restricted restricted to a single app used by setting guided access.
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah. In the system setting,
In the
there is
system
this
setting.
section
Yeah.
for accessibility option.
Yeah.
I could set an iPad to be restricted to a single app by using setting guided access. So
Right.
meaning they could
Setting
access one app by
guide.
double, like doing 2 times push on the home.
Assistive touch, grayscale, invert color. Oof. I don't know about that. So I'm looking at the triple click home button options here. Guided access is grayed out. Oh, here we go. Oh, here we go. So I turn on guided access, I turn on the accessibility shortcut, and then I go to the accessibility shortcut, and if I still, yeah, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it still doesn't do anything. Okay, we'll have to log a ticket for that one. I'm pretty sure you're not even there anymore, but the ticket will be under your name, and you'll be followed up via email and regarding everything about that. Does anyone else have any questions? If anyone's still there, I still see 6 people are watching. Just gonna give you guys a few moments, mull it over. Last call for questions. All right, well, I'm assuming since I'm not hearing anything in the chat and I'm seeing people slowly dropping off here, and before everyone leaves and I'm just sitting here all by my lonesome self talking to myself, I just once again want to thank you guys very much for attending the AirWatch webinar. We really appreciate it. If you could respond to the feedback form that you will be sent, it is very helpful for us to hear what it is that you would like to hear in this webinar, what we can improve on, maybe some ideas for future webinars, what you would like to see. Any and all feedback is appreciated. Thank you very much for attending. I know it's a little bit hard to find time in the day. We are very appreciative that you guys did find the time to come out and learn a little bit about this product. It does help us out a lot. And of course, if at any moment you have any problems with AirWatch, please feel free to contact us at the client service desk. We are open from 7:30 till 5 p.m. Monday to Friday, and we will be more than happy to answer your AirWatch questions. So once again, thank you very much, and I wish you all a very swell afternoon and the rest of your day. Go out and enjoy the sun. Take care.